Of course, we have to have you because there's so much happening in the nation, both when you're looking at coronavirus and also when you're looking at elections and politics. But let's start by talking about COVID-19. I'm looking at 15 million cases in the country, 284,000 deaths in the country total today. My question to you is, how are you responding to this surge of cases currently, and how is it impacting the Montgomery Township?
We're definitely seeing an increase in rates. We've had higher rates over the past few weeks than we had at any other point in the year. And we've been reacting by, obviously encouraging the public to limit their gatherings. We've done a number of videos and informational documents with our health officers, recommending that people not engage in any sort of indoor activity. The governor has limited indoor capacity to 10 people at any sort of gathering, and outdoor to 25. So there's a lot of steps being taken, but it's still a fact that there are a lot of infections happening, and we really need to all do what we can to limit contact that we're having with anyone outside of our immediate families or immediate households.
Yes, definitely. Mayor, when you're talking to these health officials, definitely, when you're discussing this with them, what are they attributing this surge of cases to? According to you and the other health officials, what is the reason behind such a surge that we're seeing, like, in the nation today?
Well, to some degree, it's not a surprise. Everyone knew that this is the pattern, that generally coronaviruses of this sort are much more active in the winter months. And so it started really in late February, early March in the US. And so we had a few months of winter or cold weather where it was high rates of infection. And then in the summer, we had a bit of a bump, but it wasn't that severe. And now we're back into the normal sort of season where we have these types of viruses that gain a lot of infection rates. And the only way we could have prevented this was if we had been very strict earlier on. If in the summer we had limited contacts, if states had stayed locked down, but that's not what happened. And unfortunately, a lot of people still don't believe. They don't want to wear masks. They don't want to avoid gatherings. And, in New Jersey, even when we were advising people not to meet for Thanksgiving, I would see people posting like, well, I'm going to have 20 people over at my home. And now a lot of those people have become infected. And even though the CDC recommended that people not travel for Thanksgiving, the airports were still open. They were packed. I've seen the photos. So it's not enough that the CDC just put the guidance out. They really should have limited flights, enforced having the middle row be empty. I mean, there are a lot of things that government can do. It's just that our government didn't do it.
What do you think needs to be done when we're looking at, the upcoming holiday season? Christmas is such a family holiday. It really gathers a lot of people in many households. How are you looking at the next few weeks? What are some of the measures that you have to take in order to sort of curb the spread in holiday season?
Well, we are continuing to advise people not to have gatherings at all, actually, indoor, and to even avoid outdoor socializing as much as possible. I think that people need to come up with alternative ways to gather, whether it is through virtual meetings, phone calls. That is what we need to do. And especially because we know that the vaccine is on the way. It's not like February, March, where we had no idea when or if this might end. Now we see there's light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully there's effective vaccines. So we just need to stick it out for a little while longer. I really think that the federal government should be taking much stricter measures on travel, on, enforcing testing, in temperature checks, but it's just not happening, unfortunately. So each of us individually needs to do what we can to limit our exposure to anyone outside of our household.
Mayor, while we're talking about the surge of cases, I have to ask you, in your township, let's forget the state of New Jersey right now, in your township, what would need to happen in order for you to either shut it down or place a lot of curfews like we saw earlier in the year. What scenario are you looking at where you'll have to make that decision?
Well, I would say that in New Jersey, the governor's office has been pretty effective in, being very data driven in the shutdowns that they've had. We do have cases going up, but not nearly as severely as some of the other states do. We still have capacity in our hospitals. We're not facing that sort of hospital system collapse that some of the other states in the United States are facing. So right now, as I said, the limit is very low for indoor gatherings and even for outdoor gatherings. There's been a limit on any sort of sports contact. Schools are very much virtual for the most part, or hybrid, in which there really is very little interaction happening in an official capacity. And when there are unauthorized clubs or bars, they are being shut down and they are being censored. So I don't know if there's really a lot more that could be done in New Jersey other than people just being very careful about wearing their masks at all times, not socializing. As I said, a lot of the cases that we're seeing now are from private gatherings in people's homes. And it's very hard to actually know if people are having 15, 20 people over at their home. So that really does fall on the public to actually abide by the guidance that the public health officials are putting out.
Definitely. When you're looking at state level and the federal level governments, it seems that there is a good communication and understanding with the state government and a little less when you're looking at the federal government. What kind of help does your township need directly from the federal government that the state government is unable to provide at this moment?
Well, the federal government should be giving a lot more money to both businesses that aren't able to open so that they can remain closed, and to the public so that people who really are falling behind on rent, there is rent assistance in our state, but that can only go so far. So what we really do need is for the federal government to step up and provide financial support for the public and for businesses, the way that most other countries of our level of wealth are doing. I mean, I think we see the types of programs, for example, that Canada is undertaking. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do that in the United States, but we're not. We're just letting people fend for themselves. And we're seeing the impact of that in Montgomery, even with increased demands for the food pantry, for food assistance. It's very, very tough times for a lot of people in the United States. And it's in the federal government's possibilities to provide support, but they're not, passing that stimulus package. And then simply the guidance about the importance of masking, and that this is a very serious illness and we need to avoid it. Unfortunately, even that message is not clearly being conveyed by our federal government, and that's very unfortunate.
When you're looking at the stimulus package, Mayor, do you know how much New Jersey needs from that stimulus package and how much your township needs from that stimulus package, especially for small businesses?
I don't have an exact figure, but I know that it's very, very difficult for our small businesses right now. And it's hard to tell businesses that they need to close when they're not being provided with any assistance to help them survive. So I think that, but it is something that has to be done at a national level, because it's not fair if one town closes down their businesses and the next town is open, or if one state closes down their businesses and another state is open. It really needs to happen at the national level.
Yes, definitely. You just mentioned food pantries, and I was about to get to that question. What is the condition of food insecurity in your township? And could you also tell us about the neighboring townships? What is happening in that regards?
Well, we have had a huge outpouring of support, both financial and with in-kind donations of food to our food pantry that we operate locally. And so we have given out at least more than $30,000 in grocery store gift certificates. And then on top of that, lots of, food pantry items to a number of families in our town. Thankfully, due to the generosity of the community, our food pantry is doing fine. We do have sufficient resources there. But I know that in some of our neighboring towns, that's not the case, that their food pantry and at the county level as well, there's been such a huge demand for food assistance that they really are starting to struggle and that they need a lot of re-upping of support. And unfortunately, the federal benefits for food assistance, like the SNAP program, has been undermined by the Trump administration, or there has been an effort to cut down how many people can qualify for that. Although I do hope that people do look into those sources of food assistance. We really, again, it falls to the federal government to provide this sort of food assistance, so it's not just falling on local food pantries to fulfill everyone's need for food at this time.
You know, when you're looking at the next couple of months, Mayor, and you're looking at the coronavirus cases getting worse, maybe shutdowns or possible curfews impact directly on small businesses. Do you see the need of food increase through that? When we're talking about food, do you think you'll have to feed more New Jerseyans in the next coming months?
Definitely. I think that, a lot of businesses are slowly reaching the end of how much savings they might have had, or business owners. And so they are not able to keep going. A lot of people, as well, as I said, have fallen behind on rent for several months. People are still continuing to lose their jobs. So I definitely believe that we will see a continuing rise in need for food assistance over the next several months. And that's why, this small effort that people can make to just wear their masks and keep each other healthy, that's for the sake of, even if all you care about is the economy, you don't care about your health. Economic health can only come from our public health. We can only have a healthy economy if people in our society are actually healthy. And so we all need to do our part to be as safe and promote healthy practices as possible.
What do you have to say when we're talking about masks, Mayor? President-elect Joe Biden has said that he hopefully will require for the first 100 days of his administration for everyone to wear the mask to really control the virus post January 20th. Your opinion on that?
I think that that's a great move. As I said, mixed messages from political leadership confuses the public because they don't know, well, some people are saying masks are effective, others are saying they aren't effective, whereas we know that every scientific organization, every medical practitioner has reiterated many times that masks are the primary way that we can try to control this virus, and that they are relatively effective. They're not perfect. And obviously we know that in some cases, even doctors do get infected, but we need to at least try. It's a main form of defense. And that sort of unity in the face of the pandemic is exactly what we need. We need to have a unified message, something that we're all working on together. And so I think that it's a great idea to lead by example. As the president, for him to say that this is something that's important, I think that will be very meaningful to many people in our country.
I have a few questions on this new incoming administration for you, but right before that, an issue that's concerning parents nationwide, the disruption in the school system. I'd like to know, how is the system working for your township, and what model in virtual versus in-person learning has worked the most for most parents?
So we're right now in all virtual, all distance learning mode. We did have hybrid for some time, but then the school district decided to go back to all virtual. Okay. It's been working well in our town. I know that it's tough. It's tough for kids. It's tough for parents to not have that interaction. But again, it is really important that we keep ourselves physically healthy. But it also has to do with people having access to internet resources, computing resources, and we are lucky that our town is relatively a wealthy community, and so we don't have so many issues of large segments of our population without connectivity, but that really is an issue of equity. And I know that there are various initiatives throughout the state of New Jersey and throughout the country to make sure that students who need access have that access. But I think that, the closing of schools is really pointing out the wealth inequality that we have in this country and making it even clearer all the work that we need to do to make sure that people have equal opportunity, because not having internet access, for example, or not having computing resources is obviously hurting the most disadvantaged students to a greater degree than anyone else.
Yes, definitely. So important for every child to have that access to education. How will the next semester, spring 2021, look in terms of the education system for Jersey?
Well, in our township, we are all virtual until January 19th, at least. That's what the school district has decided. So I think we have to wait and see what happens with the vaccine distribution schedules, and just how bad this wave is. It, again, will vary from state to state and context to context, but there's so much to balance out here. But there is hope in seeing that we do have effective vaccines that hopefully will help us emerge from this crisis.
Could you give us any insight into these vaccines and the distribution? We're hearing so much in news about different vaccines and how many doses are being given to the U.S. Any insight you can give us?
Well, I know that we in New Jersey, it's going to be organized on a county-wide basis. And there will be the priority lists of those first to medical practitioners, then to the elderly who face much higher rates of death and severe illness from COVID-19. And so, it's going to happen in various rounds. We are anticipating having a two-dose vaccine so that it will take, several months to really inoculate the entire community, or at least the goal will be 70% of the population. What's really important to me is that people feel a sense of confidence in these vaccines and how important it is to participate in the vaccination program, because that is really the only way that we're going to be able to emerge from this crisis to any sort of normalcy, is if we have the majority of people participating in the vaccination program. But I will say that there is a lot of work and thought being into making sure that it's being done in as organized a fashion as possible and as fair a fashion as possible.
Yes, definitely. All eyes on this vaccine and its distribution. We're just hoping the best. Let's quickly now talk about politics, because I have a couple of questions regarding post-elections and what's happening here. How was the turnout in your township for the presidential elections, specifically when you look at Asian Americans? How did that go?
It was extremely high. It was extremely high in our town. It was extremely high in the state of New Jersey. It was really unprecedented in terms of the turnout for the elections. And I think it has to do with the primarily vote by mail process. A lot of people do have difficulty getting out on election day in a normal year. And so this year, having the time to just mail or drop their ballot whenever it's convenient for people over the course of several weeks really did make it more possible for people to vote who otherwise might have had difficulty doing it. And, clearly with all of the crises that we've been facing over this past year, people were really invested in making their voices heard. And yes, the Asian American community has had turnout that we've never seen before. And I'm hoping to continue to see that it's not just in this year's presidential election that people decide to participate, but that they realize that this is something that you should do every year, that you should definitely make your voice heard in the political arena.
Mir, when you're looking at the Asian Americans, especially in your township, could you tell us what party did they align most with? What was the majority?
Certainly, it was the Democratic Party. There was a lot of support for Democrats from the Asian American community in Montgomery and in New Jersey, and I would say throughout the country. A lot of the Asian Americans, South Asians who live in my town happen to work in the medical field. They might be doctors, they could be nurses, they could be work for pharmaceutical companies. So I think that they have always understood the severity, specifically of the COVID crisis, and the need to address it in a comprehensive manner. And that's something that certainly has not been done by this presidential administration, by the Trump administration. So people were very much fired up and interested in making sure that we had new leadership going into 2021.
You know, you just mentioned President Trump, and I have two-part questions for you. One is your opinion on him still not conceding while the transition process is already beginning. And second question, I'm sure I already know the answer to it. Was there any evidence of any election fraud in your township?
I'll start with the second question. No, there was no evidence of any sort of election fraud. And you know, it's unfortunate when the president of your country undermines confidence in your electoral system, because that is really detrimental to the functioning of democracy. And in order for people to understand the types of transparency that we have in our system, I actually did an interview with our township clerk who's been serving for decades. And there were videos by our county clerk talking about how the counting process took place. And all of this was to help the public understand. And so going to President Trump not accepting the election decision, it really is, it fits right into how he's behaved for the past several years and perhaps for his entire career, which is just not accepting reality if it doesn't fit into what he likes. And it's unfortunate because it does have the potential to undermine our democratic system. And, so many people have come out against it, including many people from within his own party who've been targeted because they're not willing to overturn legitimate election results just to make him happy. I really hope and I have confidence that we'll be able to get past this, but he's doing as much damage as he can in the last few days of his administration.
Yes, it's still yet to see if he will concede, up until January 20th. We have actually no idea on it. Let's talk a little bit about President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Harris. Such a great moment for the country to see such a diverse group of people come together under their new administration. How have you felt about the mandate President-elect has, sort of placed with the focus on COVID-19, the economic crisis, and racial equality? What have you felt about that? And do you think it'll be easier for for state as well as local governments to work with federal government under this new administration?
Definitely. We really felt like we were left out in the cold when COVID first emerged, and we had so little guidance, so little help from the federal government at the state and local level. So having an administration that understands the seriousness of the crisis, has a plan in place for how to address it, wants to engage the experts on the matter, is going to be a great thing for state and local government. And I do think that President-elect Biden's priorities are in the right place. We need to work on building back better. We need to recover from this virus. That's the number one thing that we need to do. Then we need to provide economic support for all of those who are suffering due to the implications of it. And then we need to address our social justice issues when it comes to race. So prioritizing those things makes a lot of sense to me. And I am heartened by what I've seen in terms of the appointments that he's made to his administration so far. I think that it's going in a good direction to see people who are qualified in these positions of authority in his administration.
Do you think President-elect Joe Biden is going to be a messenger of inclusivity as well as dignity and respect for all? I
do. He has highlighted that inclusivity is extremely important to him, including people who didn't vote for him, that he's not just the president for himself, but for the entire country. And I can say, even as a local elected official, that that's how I feel. I know that there are some people who are not from my party. I'm an elected Democrat, and there are a lot of Republicans in my town, but I still want the best for them. I still want to serve them and make sure that they are safe, protected, and have their rights ensured. So I see that in President-elect Biden. That's how he has governed in his entire career, that he's been very inclusive and continues to be so. And I think it is also so important that we have Vice President-elect Harris on as such an important part of the administration as well, because of the perspective that she's going to bring and the work that she's done for women and for minority communities. I think that really bodes well for a positive direction for our country.
What are your hopes from this incoming administration?
My first hope is that we restore some sense of stability. I think that people are just so tired with all the instability, not really knowing what's going to happen, the undermining of our institutions. I think that we need to feel a sense of confidence in our government, that it is there to try to improve things for everyone. It's also my hope that we won't see misinformation coming from the administration. That if there is a problem, there will be honesty about it so that we can actually address it. What I really hope is that people realize that public service is a service. It should be. It should be for the sake of the community more broadly, not for yourself or for your family. And that's what I see in Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And I hope that people will take that to heart.
Finally, my last question to you is, could you briefly give us an insight into your agenda for the new year?
Well, I am just trying to keep infection rates as low as possible, keep the community informed as much as possible, keep going in the direction of inclusivity and equity in our township, hoping to serve as a model for other communities in terms of police relations with our broader community, with our minority community, reaching to vulnerable populations in our town and making sure that they have the resources that they need. And then it's a transition. I'm actually at the end of my term as mayor, and we will be swearing in a new member of our local government who will be the first Black member of our local government in Montgomery. So there's a lot of promising things happening, and I'm very enthusiastic and excited to see what's to come.
Well, I thank you for your service to the Township of Montgomery. I think they're really, really happy to have you as a mayor.
That's a sense I get, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time here, Mayor Sadaf Jaffer.